Coming up on this episode, I talk about growing up in bandages and how growing up with severe eczema kind of shaped my life or a lot of my beliefs. So let's get into it. What's going on, beautiful people? This is the Perspective Chasers podcast, and I'm your host, John. On this episode, I want to tell you a little bit about my life when I was growing up. And I've been thinking about this episode for a while, but I've been putting it off because I guess I was trying to remember more or trying to gather all my thoughts about it and that. But I don't know, I think talking about it's going to be the best way. And maybe there'll be a lesson in how much I can remember and how much I can't. But this episode is based around growing up in bandages. And it's a bit of an exaggeration, but I did spend a lot of my childhood in bandages. Especially when I was below 10, a lot of my time I had severe eczema. So I was either smeared in cream head to toe or wrapped in bandages head to toe. And it makes for an interesting childhood, to put it lightly, but there's obviously a lot that I learned from growing up that way. A lot about pain, a lot about emotion, a lot about, I guess, stoicism and kind of dealing with things yourself and what you have to go through yourself and walking your own path. Like, I remember times when I was screaming out in pain because they was taking these bandages off and making me turn crimson head to toe. And my mum was sitting there and she couldn't do anything. And now that I'm a parent, and recently my daughter had a skin thing herself, and it was heartbreaking. Like, it brought through so many flashbacks of me when I was a kid. And I might not remember everything about growing up in bandages, but one thing's for sure, I know I don't want that for my daughter. There are things that you want to protect your children from, and pain is one of them. And trust me, the eczema I had when I was growing up, that was painful enough that I'm not going to forget that quickly. There might be ins and outs of the details that I don't remember or I just forget over time. But there's a lot, I suppose, within that trauma that is going to stick with me through life. And a lot of that is going to shape me through life. And a lot of it has. I can see how a lot of it has shaped me, how I'm very much like, oh, only you can go through it, blah, 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 blah. Like, I understand where that comes from. Because that's what I experienced. That's what I lived. Like I say, my mum had to sit by while they took these bandages off me 3 or 4 times a day. And it didn't tickle. It never tickled. And only I could go through that. And standing by as a parent to see your child go through that, it's heartbreaking. So, only knows what my mum went through with me at the time, because it got bad at times. I remember one particular hospital stay. I must have been in hospital for over a week. And it was everywhere. It was literally, the only way I can describe it, it was as if my blood was boiling out of my skin. And again, it didn't tickle. And I was only a young kid. Like, I didn't have the gung-ho attitude that I do these days, where I kind of take a sadistic pleasure in the pain, hence the tattoos. But there was so much pain that I went through in those times, so much discomfort, but there was so much that it taught me. Again, about sometimes just having a bit of, solitude, and dealing with your problems yourself. And sometimes even if people want to help you, they can't. So really and truly, the only person you can count on going through things for you is you. And I think if I boil it all down, that's where that idea comes from in life. Because I knew no matter how much pain I went through, no matter how much love my mum had for me. She couldn't stop me experiencing those pains. She couldn't take away that part of my journey. That was always going to be John's origin story. And we all have an origin story. Sadly, a lot of our origin stories are in pain. But that's only where they begin. It doesn't have to be where they end. So now, years later, I look back on those times and I try to take as many lessons from them as I can. I try to think back to the times where I was wrapped in bandages and what it made me think and how it made me feel about the world. Don't get me wrong, there was a long time where I probably resented the world. I asked a lot of why me and why does my body hate me as such? But over the years, I learned that wasn't the case. And again, that contributes to my mindset of some things will be. And that was my burden to bear. And I went through life and kind of got to a point where I thought I outgrew it. And it comes back. So some things are hard to escape. And there was a long time I convinced myself that I'd conquered my eczema and this demon that had been chasing me through childhood. And then it comes back through adulthood. And again, I know it's a medical condition and everything else, but when you understand my eczema the way that I did, it was very emotional and a very, very tied into my emotions and my environment and everything else. Everything was intertwined in that sense. So I thought if I mastered one aspect, or so-called mastered an aspect, i.e. emotions, and suppressed my emotions and kept them under control, that I wouldn't experience my eczema. But that wasn't true. Because I couldn't keep a lid on it all the time. And even if I did keep a lid on it, it was still there. It was just beneath the surface. So there's a lot to learn. And I often take a trip down memory lane to these kind of memories of growing up and what I learned from them. Like there's little things that I can see years later rippled through life. There was an instance where I used to wear long sleeve pajamas as a kid, and because of the cream and everything else, it was easier than having like sticking to your sheets or whatever else. So you'd stick to the pajamas, at least the pajamas would come with you. But one night I must have rolled out of my pajamas and only one arm came out of the sleeve and I kept on rolling and it ended up like strangling me in my sleep. And to this day, I don't like things tight around my neck. I don't like to sleep in a t-shirt or with anything around my neck. Like it's scarred me for life in a sense. But I know where that originated. I know why that is the case, and I don't wear long sleeve t-shirts and I don't sleep in t-shirts. Lesson learned. I don't, even if it was a once in a million shot that I rolled out and rolled onto my sleeve, I don't want to risk it again. So that's something that I've taken with me through life. And there are many aspects of that through eczema. Like I say, the initial mindset of only you can go through it. I think it's true. And yeah, it took me getting wrapped in bandages day in, day out to learn that. But trust me, I learned that lesson deep. Maybe too deeply, maybe to the point where I shut people out and think, yeah, it's just me that can do it, da 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 da. And I guess that's a journey of unlearning that I have to go on. But in the first place, I had to learn that there was only some things that I could go through. And the same is going to be said for you. The same is going to be said for everybody. No matter what affliction you have in life, no matter what life you lead, there are going to be things that only you can deal with. And there's going to be lessons that only you can learn. And sometimes there's going to be only ways that you can learn the lesson. So when you're in that mode of asking, why me? Maybe the answer is, because you're stubborn and that's the way you will learn. I know that that's true definitely for me. My stubbornness can be my greatest ally or my greatest enemy. But that's me. And to get back on topic, growing up in Bandages for a long time, I let define me. And I was the kid with eczema and da 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 da. And it was difficult going to school sometimes, I guess, thinking everybody else is going to judge me, trying to cover them up, and even little things like they would restrict my movement. So I don't like anything that restricts me now. Anything that tries to contain me or anything that's tight on me that restricts my movement, I want to break out of. Simply because I had that before and I didn't like it. I grew to dislike it very quickly. And I'm in no rush to get wrapped up in bandages again. And I suppose if it came, I'd do it because I know I'd get through it. And there's another lesson in there in the sense of even if what you've got to do is what you don't want to do, you know you can still get through it. So sometimes you just got to suck it up, buttercup, and push through. Like, if I got hit with a wave of severe eczema now, I wouldn't like to use bandages, no. But I know it would be an effective means to combat it. So is it something that I'd consider? Probably. But I wouldn't look forward to it. And I think that's the thing, man. I suppose it's like tattoos. People want the artwork on their skin, but not everybody wants to go through the pain, so they use numbing gel or whatever else so they can still get the tattoo. I like the pain. And again, maybe that's because I have a sadistic tie to it from my childhood, but I find a certain peace in the pain because I know that what I'm getting is a piece of art and nothing comes for free. So the pain is me paying that price. I know that going through the pain that I did with my eczema was not pleasant at all. But there was a lot of lessons that I learned in that pain. And I can't articulate all of them, and I may never be able to articulate all of them. I may not even remember all of them. But it doesn't mean they're not there. There are things that I'd have gone through in those times where it would have shaped me in parts of who I am now that I won't recognize if I look back. But it doesn't mean they're not there. What I went through is always going to be a part of me. It's always going to be a part of my story. No matter how much of it I can remember play by play, it doesn't make any of it less true. It might make it feel less true in the immediate, or I might not be able to remember it or whatever else. But that's still a part of my journey. That's still a day in the life of me. And the same will be said for you. And there's things that we can learn from this. Like, if I never looked back at those times of my eczema being at its worst and me being in my most discomfort, I would never have taken a lot of the understandings that I have through life. And I'd have probably looked back on it quite negatively still. Probably looked at it as a victim. Still had that why me mentality. Instead of really and truly being grateful. Not for the hard times, but for being able to get through them. Because going through that stuff, that tempered my steel in a way that I can't describe. And again, it could be a massive ego and blah, 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 blah. But there's a way that I see myself. There's a fire in my belly that I can see, that twinkle in my eye when I'm fired up, for lack of a better way of saying it, that I don't see in everybody. Don't get me wrong, I see it in some people. But they happen to be people that I tend to click with. Maybe because it's trauma loves company. And when people have been through something, whether it be something overly severe or something just severe to them, they take that with them. They carry that with them through life, and it shapes a lot of the way they look at life. But also kind of bestows upon them a little flame, a little flicker of how it is to have your back against a wall. And the fact that they know they got through, well, at least this is true for me. The fact that I know that I got through before fires me up so much to get through again. It's that proof of concept. It's, I've done it once, so I'll do it again. And I love that feeling. That feeling of testing your mettle. Just out of sheer curiosity. Like, it brings a smile to my face just thinking about it. No matter what it is, no matter what aspect of life I look at, I still like testing my mettle. I still like taking it to the extremes. Wherever it be any aspect of life I can think of. And I'm thinking of a few, but I don't want to get myself in trouble. But I like to test the limits. And those limits can be fun. But they can be dangerous. And they can be painful. So it's always about having that consciousness when you're testing yourself. Understanding how far you're pushing it. And again, it's everybody's got their breaking point. But you'll never know where yours is unless you get close to it. And for me, that's a bit of a game. It's a game of catch me if you can. Like, those tough times when I was growing up, if I was to scale them up now, like, if I was to impart that amount of pain on myself now, I know I'd take it. I'd take it a lot easier than I took it when I was younger. But now, how much pain could I take? How much could you amplify that? If you used to scale it up now, I've been through multitudes of more life experiences, more pain, physically, mentally, emotionally, whatever. I can bear more as a person as it is. So what do I need to do to push that extreme now? To get to that edge of I'm testing my mettle. And it takes many different forms. Like, there's ways in which it would pay on, which it's going to pay on through my life, which I haven't seen yet. Like, I've kind of covered how I've seen it pay on in my life and ways where I think it shaped me. But like I say, there's a lot that goes unseen. So there's a lot that's going to pay forward, and some may be positive, some may be negative. But I'm not going to know until I get to that final chapter of my life and I look back on it. But I know that there is a lot that shaped me in those moments. I've always had this kind of, not a problem with, but kind of a misunderstanding of when people talk about their inner child. Because I'm not a child no more. Like I say, I remember the times when I was a child and they was fairly traumatic. So I know I'm not that kid anymore. I know I'm not that person anymore. I'm not that entity, that being, however you want to frame it. I'm me today, and that's only me today. Tomorrow I'll be somebody new. And that's the understanding I carry through life. But that's not to say that that person isn't a part of me. I just don't think it's me anymore. I just know it's part of who I was, or part of the process in me becoming me. So over the years, I've stopped resenting those bad times and that pain and everything else, and instead not welcome it, because again, I don't think any of us wants to be uncomfortable. We all kind of want to enjoy life, but you don't shy away from it. And I suppose that's probably one of the bigger things is I don't shy away from the difficult things anymore. I don't shy away from the pain. I don't shy away from the struggles. If anything, I do welcome it a bit. And again, sometimes that's positive, sometimes that's negative. Sometimes it makes you a glutton for punishment. But that's all about this journey of life. Sometimes you need to unlearn lessons you've learned before. Sometimes you learn things a bit too well, and you need to take a step back. And I think I done that with emotions. Especially through eczema and everything else. I bottled things up far too much for far too long. But it doesn't mean that I can't go back and unlearn those lessons. It doesn't mean that I have to stay that little kid, for lack of a better word, that can't handle their emotions. I've changed. Literally, I'm not a little kid anymore, and I'm more willing to confront my emotions. That might not be true all of the time, but I try to make it true more often than not. And do I still get hits of eczema? Yeah. Is it always going to be emotionally related? No. But it took me a while to learn that. We're all going through these weird learning experiences we call life. And things change all the time. So understand there are things that we're going to learn through life experience, good and bad. They're going to shape how we view the world. But that world changes. And the truth that you see realistically is only true to you. So giving it room to change, giving it room to grow and develop over time is always going to be a good thing in my books. Anyway, I'll start to go on tangents, so I'm going to wrap this up. Never know, I might do an episode 2 on it if I remember more. But the biggest takeaway I think from this is, even if you do have trauma in your life, understand it doesn't have to define you. And that's not me saying my trauma is greater or lesser than anybody else's. I just understand it's my trauma. But if you've got your trauma in your life, it doesn't have to define you. I don't let mine define me, and there's a lot of other people out in life that don't let their trauma define them. So if you're caught up on something that is traumatic and is a scar in your past, try to understand you don't have to live there. It doesn't have to define you. It doesn't have to be all that there is to you. You can accept it and move past it, but you have to accept it. The seed for this episode is going to be, take a minute to reflect and realize that you've gone through a lot, good and bad. And you will go through a lot more, good and bad. And although that is true, you can only ever experience a moment at a time. So try not to get too caught up on what's before or what's after. Because you can only ever handle what's now. All the best, and I'll catch you on the next one.